Hey guys, out of town, stopping driving because I wanted to stop and answer a few questions. So last night I was on a few phone calls, so I didn't check some of my messages, and people were saying or sending me links and stuff like that, saying with news articles saying that Russia's invading Ukraine and stuff like that. And I just want to actually put that more accurate info out there. This is going to be a short video. My upcoming little conference chat will be in this subject a little bit more depth, but I wanted to put it out there that Russia is not invading Ukraine. It didn't. What they did is, if you look at the back page news or news from other countries and stuff like that, is what they actually did was they went into Donetsk and Luhansk. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. And a lot of people don't understand that those are no longer part of Ukraine. I think if I remember correctly, it was back in 2014 they separated themselves. They voted for their independence basically from Ukraine, so they're their own province. And if you look at the demographic there, 90% of the people are Russian. They want to be part of Russia. So, Russia's not currently invading Ukraine. I don't think they're going to invade. I understand their position. I understand why they're doing what they're doing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But a lot of people are freaked out thinking there's World War III starting, and it hasn't started. Russia, like if you look at some of the news that Putin put out, the Russian president Putin put out, he recognized their independence, which is kind of a big deal when part of a country separates from another country, is for other major powers to recognize their independence. And so he didn't invade those countries. So he recognized their independence and he didn't invade them. What he did was moved his troops into there. They want to be part of Russia. Everything I can find on the subject, and I haven't been able to delve as deep into it as I personally want to, but tomorrow I will be able to, is they want to be part of Russia, and they were invited in. This has happened with countries all around the world. It's normal. It's not some big old red flag, oh crap, we're going into World War III type thing. No, it's just those two provinces separated from Ukraine back in 2014. So 8 years ago, almost 10 years ago, almost a decade ago, they were officially recognized as independent by Russia now. And Russia walked in there. It was a brilliant strategy recognizing them first, even though they're already invited in. And I personally believe that those two provinces are going to be within the next couple of years, be fully engulfed into Russia, become part of Russia, because that's what it seems like they want. It's nothing to raise red flags on or anything like that. I can understand Ukraine not wanting to give them up, because if you've done any research on Ukraine whatsoever, a lot of their industry comes from, like, their major manufacturing industry comes from those provinces. So they're they took a hard hit, and it's like they want it back. They want their money back. I can understand that, but at the same time, trying to fight and force it back isn't going to go into play. How the U.S. and other European powers, what they want with those provinces in Ukraine, and for Ukraine to be part of NATO, is, if you look at it, like, it's a stepping point going in for Russia to go into Russia. It's kind of like what the USSR did with Cuba and the US. You know, how they moved, they're putting missile silos down in Cuba to be able to launch onto the eastern seaboard. And that's kind of what those providences in Ukraine and Ukraine in general would give a lot of NATO capabilities to step off into the major cities in Russia. You know, if you look at Moscow, from what last time I looked at the maps and everything, Moscow's relatively close to Ukraine. I don't think it's more than 300-400 miles. It's probably even less than that. So, you know, if they do move any missile capabilities and stuff like that into Ukraine, like if NATO becomes part, or Ukraine becomes part of NATO, and NATO moves those into there, it's literally almost identical to what the USSR did with Cuba and the US back in the day. And so Putin, you know, and this is just a brief overview. What I believe Putin is doing is he's putting up kind of like what you can call a tripwire. You know, it's something there. It gets an immediate reaction to a trespasser. So if anybody tries to push closer into Russia, into Moscow, it immediately sets off something there, alerts everybody back into the country to be able to send an even more powerful force behind them. You know, and the U.S. have done that. Most countries have done that. You know, like with the demilitarized zone in between North and South Korea, we have U.S. troops stationed there. That guarantees North Korea is not going to invade South Korea, because in order to do that, they have to kill American service members. And if they do that, they know the entire U.S. military is going to come down on them. So it kind of keeps the peace. And that's kind of what I see Russia doing right now. We'll go, like I said, we'll go a little bit more into detail about that, you know, during the little conference meeting. And I'll be, once I get everything set up, and I'll be putting it up on the page. I'll even paste it into the description on this video for those who are seeing it through YouTube. And you know, it's going to be free to join. You just have to download, or like the great thing about this new site I'm using, you can log in and see the video and interact. But you can also, if you're driving, you can call in on your phone, have your Bluetooth in, and you won't be able to see if I'm writing anything up on a whiteboard, or if I'm showing pictures. You won't be able to see that, but you'll be able to hear and also talk. So, you know, and that video too, once it's done, which, you know, that can last 2-3 hours, that will be posted up on YouTube also. But right now, I'm trying to tell people not to worry too much about it, to start looking at alternative news sources, looking at both sides of the story, and realize that Russia's not doing anything that any other country wouldn't be doing. We don't want a quote-unquote enemy at our doorsteps that if they launch a missile directly into a capital city or any major city, that we would have no time to evacuate or respond. You know, again, the U.S. did this in Cuba, and them putting their troops there is basically like setting up a tripwire. If anybody wants to pass in there and try to take those providences by force, which, remember, they voted for their freedom back in 2014. So if anybody tries to take them by force before they go through the whole legal process of joining back into Russia, you know, it's gonna set off a major conflict, and nobody in their right mind wants that. Unfortunately, here in the U.S., we have a bunch of fucking dipshits. I hate to say it that way, hate to be harsh, but we have a bunch of dipshits who are running the show. Like, look at the standing president right now. He doesn't even know which way is up, down, left, or right. And unfortunately, he's going to be pushing and calling some of the shots. So, who knows which way it's going to sway, but, any intelligent, halfway intelligent leader is not going to do a damn thing. Because Russia's not doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything you or I wouldn't do if we were in that position. So, and they're setting up a tripwire. I call it that. I don't know what other people would call it, but I call it a tripwire because that's exactly what it is. It's an early warning set off. It holds the line long enough for major forces to really come into bear. And, it's smart. It's a brilliant move by Russia. And it's basically, if anything does kick off, it's going to be the West that starts it. And I'll explain my ideals and theories behind that. But I think it is really going to expose a lot of the people who are causing the problems. So it could be a very good thing that all this is happening. I don't want another war. The U.S. doesn't need to be involved in another war, especially how they ended in Afghanistan. It was horrible. We just gave all our shit to a freaking enemy and said, hey, come fuck us up. So, we don't need to go into another war. Unfortunately, the people who are sitting up there calling the shots, they have shares in some of the major defense contractors. So, to them, it's very lucrative to go into a war. And that's exactly what a lot of these defense contractors are doing. A lot of the private military companies are doing. They're just looking at the dollar signs. They're looking to make great freaking pay. And they will make fantastic pay off this. So they want to go into it. And so that's why I think there's a lot of scare and a lot of hype pushing this war, making it into, it's not a war, making it seem like there's a war and that the other side's starting it, when they're not really doing anything that you and I wouldn't be doing in the same place if we were in their same place. There's no major conflict unless one side decides to do something illegal. And Russia hasn't done anything illegal. To me, they're protecting their ass, but also protecting their assets. Those two provinces that want to come into Russia, they're protecting them. We did that ourselves when Texas separated from Mexico. We recognized them as independents, and less than a year later, we brought them into the U.S. So again, what is Russia really doing wrong? They're not doing anything wrong. Forget the narrative that the media is trying to say. Forget what the politicians are trying to say. Forget what all these so-called national agencies, these experts, these intelligence agencies are trying to say, because these are the same guys that fed you bullshit after bullshit after bullshit over the past 2 decades of the Iraq war and Afghanistan war. These are the same guys that push the false narratives on the pandemic, the Libya, freaking Panama, Kosovo. You look at all the major conflicts over the past 30 years that we have now come realize that everything we were initially told by these intelligence agencies was straight up a lie. Just look at that, and it's the exact same agencies, and a lot of it, 90% of it, is the exact same people within those agencies and the exact same politicians. Biden's been around 30, 40 years, maybe longer. I haven't really looked at his record, but I know he's been around for decades, and he was part of those lies. So how can you trust him now? Our court system has a concept called dirty hands. If you get caught in one lie, the judge is going to take everything else you say as a lie unless you have just a shit ton of evidence to prove otherwise. And right now, these politicians, these security agencies, They got dirty hands. They've had dirty hands for the past 30, 40 years. Some of them longer. Some of this shit's been, like, some of these people's been involved in it since the 70s. Longer than a lot of my viewers have been alive. So how can you really trust them with this narrative? And that's why I tell you guys to do your own research, contact people in those regions, contact people from those regions, and get straight answers if you can. And hopefully, like, you come to your own conclusion and start seeing bullshit for bullshit. You don't want to sit there and be the guy that's following the media narrative and throwing a freaking firecracker and a pile of cow shit and have it get all over you. You want a guy that sees it as it is and walks around it. And that's why I can't reiterate enough to do your research. And so when we have that conference call, it most likely will be Wednesday, tomorrow. What's that? 23rd, I think, February 23rd. So do your research, do your reading, write down your questions, bring them forth. If you got alternative news outlets that have different information, bring those links so you can throw them up in the chat room so other people, when we're talking about it, they can go and be listening and reading. The more you bring as far as your research, the more research you do, the deeper we're going to get into this topic. If you do a lot of prior research and you have the basic understanding of it, and everybody does, then we'll go through all that real quick just to make sure everybody's on the same basis. Then we'll go deeper, way deeper. But if there's a lot of people who didn't do that basic research, then we got to go in depth enough with that to get everybody on the same page before we go deeper, which will limit us as far as time-wise. And those of you who've been on some of these conference calls before, like, I may schedule 2 hours, but the last one went 5.5, like, because we just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And there were people who were like, hey, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning my time, so I got to get up in 5 hours to go to work, so I'm off. That's cool. It's going to be recorded, and it's all going to be uploaded, so if you have to miss part of it, that's fine. If you have to miss the whole thing, that's fine. Just make sure you check the YouTube channel and catch the update, catch when the whole video. Last time, I think the video had to be split into 2 or 3 different sections. That's cool. It'll all be uploaded within a few days after. But make sure you pass this video around, get as many people involved with as many different questions as many different news sources, conversations they've had, because literally we have social media. You should be able to reach out to people in those areas and see what's really going on. Just like a couple years ago when France was having their civil unrest, it's surprising how many people didn't hear about it. It's because the news didn't want to push it. And it's surprising that the few minor news organizations that did talk about it, they only talked about one side and they didn't talk about the other. When it's super simple just to send a Facebook message or an email or something to people who are actually there and say, hey, what's your view on this? What should I be looking at? What are your local news stations saying? What are you seeing? And on my Facebook, I did post a lot of alternative stuff that I did get sent. Unfortunately, Facebook censored a lot of it, but there's still, I went back and looked at it this afternoon, and there's still a lot of it up. So if you didn't hear about what was happening in France, then go check that out. It's same thing when China was having their university, when they're doing things. You got to take the research into your own hands. You have to step up and do it. You can't trust these people who've been caught lying to you over and over and over and over again. You don't want to. That's lazy, and that's ignorance. You're allowing them to take advantage of your ignorance. You don't do that. Absolutely don't do that. Do your research. Join us during this conference. Like I said, on the bio, the description of this video, once I have everything set up for that, I'll be editing the description to have that link there. I'll also put it in the top of the comments, so you guys should be able to get it on my Facebook pages. You'll be able to see that too, and a lot of the people who are sharing these videos who I already know are going to be part of the conference, I'll have them send out the links to everything prior. So, do your research, plan on joining the conference or at least looking at the videos later, and don't be worried about this stuff happening in Russia. If it goes sideways, could it affect us? Oh, absolutely it will. Absolutely. But I want to think that cooler heads are going to prevail. Russia's playing it very intelligent, very smart. They're not crossing any lines. They're not doing anything illegal. So it's going to be hard for some of these Western politicians who want the war so they can make some money. It's going to be hard for them to trick the people into justifying the war. So I don't think it's going to happen. But in the coming days and weeks, we'll see. It seems like they're pushing pretty hard for it from our news media. You got a lot of politicians talking crap about Russia, how what they're doing is wrong. But it's like, we've done the same thing. There is nothing illegal that he's done or even immoral. He hasn't shot a single person or had a single person shot. So as far as I'm concerned, we have no justification for war. But if they can't trick Russia into doing it, who's to say they don't make up a false reason to go in, to start the war? Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Does that sound familiar? I wouldn't put it past their politicians. They've done some shady, corrupt shit before. They might do it again. We'll see. But until then, try to relax, try to stay calm, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, stay safe.